people have invested a lot in information security programs and frameworks that are based on a lot of other standards or their key regulatory requirements. And the best way to do this is to relate it to that. And by doing the mappings, it allows people to really leverage the knowledge and the programs they have to the utmost to be able to bring in cloud.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative, in conjunction with Cyber Reason, is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC. I am your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Jim Reavis, CEO at Cloud Security Alliance.
Thanks for having me, and kudos for putting together such a great compendium. And I'm glad to be a small part of it. But
Thank
you. The information security industry, I got into it almost immediately after college in 1987. I went to work as a database programmer for a bank, decided I liked IT a lot more, became a partner in I don't know if anybody remembers Computer Lands, but selling computers.
Oh, yeah.
And then what got interesting, because Dell came along and was basically blowing away all of the box companies, was doing systems integration. And then the big systems integration that was happening in the early 90s became this thing called the internet. And what was the big systems integration problem was security. So by about 1994, I was full-time doing information security, cybersecurity. And so I've just kind of progressed with it, done some of my own startups, work managing nonprofits, just sort of building a big network and really enjoying it. The thing I like about information security, or we kind of have to call it cybersecurity now, so I could always remember that. But it's the combination of science and art, where you definitely have a lot of technology and you have the bits and bytes, but you have thoughtful adversaries, and it takes a lot of creativity that we need to be thinking about. And so I was hooked early on, and I've continued to try and be involved and make a difference where I can.
Sure, absolutely. So you formed the Cloud Security Alliance, and what gave you the idea to pursue that path?
So the time frame was like 2007, and I just got done with a couple of major engagements, and I was kind of thinking what was next. And you're starting to see some virtualization happening, and there's a gentleman who writes sort of entrepreneurial books that I saw speak, named Daniel Burrus, and he said something that, hey, solve tomorrow's problems today. Don't look at today's problems, because there's probably a million companies trying to solve those, or they may be very transient, but try to understand trends. And so as I looked at the virtualization a little bit further, I found cloud, and I could see how compelling it was. And I was actually sort of worried people might go to it too fast, like maybe in 5 years everybody was going to be all cloud, which was foolish. But the tomorrow problem to solve was people are going to be into this technology, and they won't have a defensible set of best practices to be able to communicate to their business owners, risk management, auditors, all those sorts of people. So the idea was, let's start working on that, understanding that's not a problem right now, but and we finally did launch it in early 2009, but in the 2012 timeframe, it was probably going to be a pretty big deal, and in fact it was. And so we were able to do that. And we heard from a lot of organizations and enterprises that said, thank goodness you came along when you did. It helped us accelerate our cloud journey. It enabled us to do this faster, and that equated for some companies millions of dollars in either IT cost savings or just more likely speed and being able to deploy new products and explore new business opportunities.
Sure. Did you have people saying at the time, what's this cloud stuff? Do we
Do we,
Oh, yeah.
do we really need that?
I don't want to name and shame, but there were several either organizations that I would have given the Cloud Security Alliance the whole model and everything to, and just let them run with it, that said that it's a toy, it's a fad, or it's nothing new. It's the mainframe come back. It's just outsourcing, which there's elements of truth in all of that, but it's as we all know, it's way more nuanced, and it's become its own thing, and it's developed all sorts of accompanying technologies on top of it that are cloud native. So, but yeah, there was a fair amount of naysayers. There always is when there's not an incumbent sort of market to see there. So it's definitely exceeded my expectations. And it's some of the companies and how they've grown in cloud. It's pretty surprising to see. But I think we're well on our way to what's probably a 20-year journey to be like to maximize cloud usage. We're probably 2/3 the way through that now.
Do you think there's still a lot of fear there about moving to the cloud?
There is. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of lessons learned. There's a lot of case studies. There's a lot of knowledge about doing it correctly. But there's always going to be fear when you're doing new things. And I think if I were to take sort of the enterprise point of view on this, that I feel like they are getting a better handle on when they take infrastructure as a service, a big cloud provider, and they go do their own development. They're getting more mature. They're not all the way there yet, but in doing like the continuous deployment, continuous integration, DevOps are understanding better how to secure that. They're gaining confidence with that. The software as a service component is more problematic now because it's another layer. It's the infrastructure guys plus the software as a service company on top of that. It's a more complex scenario, and then you have multi-cloud too. You have a lot of different complexities there. So we're making progress. We're getting through pieces of it, but certainly there's that fear. From smaller businesses, in a lot of cases they're not aware of any other option, and so they're going to do this. But we got to make sure that the rest of us are being very good custodians and stewards for those smaller organizations. And they may be adopting it because they say a big company is, but those big companies are doing assessments and they're making sure that the security controls are in place. And the smaller guys aren't necessarily doing it, which is why we try to help to step in there and make sure there's a baseline that everyone's sort of abiding by.
So how does the small company figure out whether the cloud that they're going to, whether that's secure or not?
It's in most cases they are doing it by playing follow the leader, and they are looking at what other companies in their industry or ones that they know and respect, what are they doing and using. So we are trying to do more education for small businesses to say, hey, go look at our STAR registry, for example, and you can go see the companies in there that have certified themselves to a standard for security. Still, a lot of them don't do it. It's simple to look, and when we look at it, companies that are in our registry, they don't, as far as we've seen, get breached to any significant level. And so
how does that process work? Is that a voluntary assessment?
Yeah, the CSA STAR program, it's a 3-level program where there's a level 1 of self-assessment, which any provider of any time, small or large, they go fill out our questionnaire and they submit it. And while on the one hand it's a self-assessment, on the other hand you want to put a lot of care into it if it's going to be publicly viewable by the whole world, because transparency is a big part of, I think, how we achieve security. So there is that level. And then our level 2 is the third-party assessment, which we have an ISO 27001 version of our CSA framework, and then we have a It's essentially a SOC 2 Type 2 version of an attestation using our best practices. So you can do both. And then our third level, which we've got pieces of it in place, is more the continuous monitoring of it. And that's 30 days right now we have in place. We're working on some things to make that more real time in the future. But it's cloudsecurityalliance.org/star, and it's an easy search engine for organizations.
So
to go
anybody
find
can
out.
access that then? Or?
Anybody can go access that. So it's free. And any company can go submit too. They don't need to pay us a fee or anything like that to submit. We try to, as with our research and everything else, we try to make as much publicly available as we can. Bad business model, but I think good for the community.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, available at Amazon.com and other booksellers.
No, it's good. It's excellent to share that kind of information. So you created the cloud controls matrix.
Yes.
Talk about what that is and how that came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Cloud Controls Matrix is our number one most popular downloaded research artifact. It's a framework of control objectives, I think 132 different controls that are emphasized for what's important in cloud, and they're categorized by if it's a provider control, it's a more of a tenant control, or if it's a shared responsibility, where both need to do this. And we also try to make sure that these controls are mapped to a wide variety of different standards, as well as are they relevant on like the physical infrastructure data center level or at the application level. How it came about is that we started with our guidance, which is just the long narrative best practices white paper. And what we found is something was needed to boil that down to something that's more actionable for the way security programs work. So actually, and I love to call out the volunteers who do this, but 2 people independently came to me saying we need something that is like a controls framework for this. And one was Becky Swain, who was at Cisco at the time, and she's been one of our lead volunteers. And the other one was Phil Aguilli, and he's, I think, at U.S. Bank now. I forget where he was then.
Avalon. He also contributed a page to the book talking about controls.
That's right. Yeah. So those 2 independently came to me like at the same time with we think this is needed, paired them together as co-chairs, had a call for volunteers, which is how we do our working groups, and just sort of crowdsource this. And we got that together, and I think that was in the 2011 timeframe. I'm pretty sure that was done, and so we've refined it several times.
Have those controls changed a lot over, since 2011, or have they stayed primarily the same? I'm gonna, and this is a total guess, I'm gonna say that they are around 60% consistent, and about 40% have changed. It's been pretty stable since we did the version 3 a few years back. That it operates at a high enough level that it doesn't need to change to a huge degree. So a lot of people say, well, is 132 controls enough? Because we see these other frameworks that have a whole lot, but these are control objectives. And the specific technical controls that you could use to satisfy, there can be a lot of different ways of doing it. So it's actually, we feel it's pretty comprehensive. Like what would some of those controls be?
Well, we don't go to the level of say, you should do a vulnerability scan X a number of times. We more go on, do you have the appropriate vulnerability management program in place that's in scope for what you're doing? So and the same for are you using state-of-the-art encryption and key links versus specifying a specific one? And then we leave it to, if someone's auditing against these controls, that, hey, if they do this in 2011 or they do this in 2000 2020, then what is state of the art? What's the appropriate key length? How concerned are you about quantum or whatever other issues you have that help do that interpretation? So we think that makes it more enduring. We are doing an update, which will be a major one, the first we've done in quite a while, that we're kicking off here in 2020 for the things like DevOps, DevSecOps, some containerization, some areas where we think it's very important for the audit assurance profession to understand, hey, you can't do necessarily the same types of testing that you would typically do, so you really have to shift your focus on understanding the configuration and how it's locked down and structured, so it is something that you can trust will be there. So there's those sorts of things. We're going to change in the controls or add controls for some new developments, as well as create an educational program and awareness so people understand why we made those changes and how to really think differently about how they do audit and assurance activities.
Sure. One thing I really liked about the controls matrix is that it maps it to all the other frameworks and regulations, and people are always looking for those maps, and I've always directed people to the Cloud Security Alliance because you've done that kind of work.
That's part of in the book where we talk about it being a bridge, that we felt that was a very important way to get cloud security in the door, that people have invested a lot in information security programs and frameworks that are based on a lot of other standards or their key regulatory requirements. And the best way to do this is to relate it to that. And by doing the mappings, it allows people to really leverage the knowledge and the programs they have to the utmost to be able to bring in cloud. So we've thought that is pretty fundamental. It's something we're always going to do. And it was a little bit disruptive because at the time when we were doing that, that's actually something that would cost a lot of money for you to actually buy mappings. And I think more and more it's becoming more standard, but we felt like that was just something that always should be given away.
Yeah, and to do inside your companies, a lot of people were doing those manually by themselves and spending many, many hours of time. So what sort of things would you say are specific to the cloud security versus other considerations? What makes it different that if you're going into the cloud, you should be really thinking about these five things?
Well, I think some of the fundamental elements that people need to understand is we get that it's sort of someone else's computer, and we understand that, but it's really pretty nuanced because we built this reference model. It's sort of a 10-layered reference model that depicted software as a service as a layer on top of platform as a service on top of infrastructure as a service, and everything you see is a mashup to some degree. And how it's different from an outsourcing is it can be very transient. You can have relationships that are like they're milliseconds, and you may not know all of the different entities that are involved in a SaaS application out of the box in what you're doing. So some of the fundamental things we talk about that people need to understand is to sort of peel the layers there and understand what are the underlying components, and are the security controls applicable to the infrastructure provider there? Is it the SaaS provider? Are there gaps? Are they inheriting controls properly? Are they each focusing on a set of controls that is not completely comprehensive? And so that's an area we think that's really important. The data is always like so important in everything we do, not just cloud. But cloud introduces the whole, I think, the data sovereignty issue and makes it a lot more complex in where it can be harder to know, where is your information? Are we really complying? Do we really understand in a big, like an email application that's that's maybe redundant over a lot of different data centers. If our information is staying in the area that we need it to, how do we do the encryption? Is it we need to vet what capabilities that the cloud provider might have, the SaaS application might have. Does it give us the ability to introduce some of our own capabilities, like bring your own keys or those sorts of things to be able to handle it? The forensics and the like e-discovery, chain of command of information, how that works can be very nuanced. How the logging, how to sort of be able to prove all those activities happening behind the scenes, which cloud providers, boys, from when we started and where they are now, they will provide you like a fire hose of a lot of different information, but being able to understand it and piece it all together becomes pretty important. So it comes in, you want to understand provenance of things. You want to understand sort of the authenticity and the immutability of the information that you're given. You want to understand that they are complying and giving you the abilities to federate identity and use the latest available tools for securing and encrypting and bring some of your own cloud security, cloud management capabilities to it. So it definitely brings some of its own nuances at a very high level. From a risk management level, I think we can look at a lot of these things and say, hey, it fits in a lot of the risk management frameworks. But as one of our speakers actually at our summit that we did this week, Phil Venables, the chief risk officer at Goldman Sachs, said that you've got to relentlessly push your risk management methodologies into the technology, and you have to be very well versed in the specific technologies that you're using in cloud.
Very good. So does the small company, do they have any, is it kind of a, whatever the provider is going to give, do they have much clout in that, in asking for logs and wanting to do vulnerability scans and that sort of thing?
I would say that for the small company, they are not going to have, in a lot of cases, they're not going to know the questions to ask, and they're not going to have the ability to get anything different from what the standard package is. I think, having said that, a lot of enterprises will say they have some of these same problems too, although they can go work and get, and they've negotiated several different sorts of contracts. For a small company, it's probably a security upgrade anyway. I think everyone has had the experience. They've had a hard drive crash. They've lost information when they've tried to do it themselves. And so it ends up being an out-of-the-box upgrade, but definitely the more nuanced, let me understand log files. Hey, I got sued. I need to go produce this information that I don't know where it is. I think I deleted it. They're probably going to have more difficulties in being able to do that. And the nice thing is there are more and more. It's a burgeoning area of consulting partners with the major cloud providers that are specializing in SME, and so that's often what I recommend to the smaller companies is understand who the consulting partners are that are well trained by and authorized by their cloud providers of choice. Those, I think we're gonna see a big sort of growth in that area to the intermediary between the cloud providers, actually big and small, to have the knowledge to be able to help you on your journey through the cloud.
Sure. Well, thank you. This has been very enlightening, Jim, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Well, I really appreciate it, Todd. I know this is a late one of the day. I guess my only complaint is we should have been doing this with beer. We should have been drunk potting this one, but I've really enjoyed it. Again, kudos to you on the book, and maybe someday you and I, we can create like a tall guys security association too. I think there's a need for that.
There you go. There might be limited demand for that, but we can
start with 2.
We'll take care of that segment of the population.
Thanks, Todd.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Jim.
CyberReason is the champion for today's defenders, providing an endpoint security platform to prevent, detect, and respond to malicious operations on computers, mobile devices, servers, and the cloud. CyberReason. End cyber attacks from endpoints to the enterprise to everywhere. Learn more at cyberreason.com/CISO stories.